Welcome to the Bloom Where You're Planted podcast from Never Too Late Cafe. I'm your host, Laura Womack. Each week, we sit down for a chat with someone just like you, someone who had an idea, a passion, a dream, or sometimes just a thought, and planted that seed, watched it grow into something they wanted to share with the world. If you have an idea for a topic or someone that would be a guest for the Bloom Where You're Planted podcast, feel free to reach out to us on Facebook, where you can join our Never Too Late Cafe Facebook group. We'd love to hear from you. And today I have two special guests with me, Dave Gutkowski and George Galanek. So this is about George's story. And where are you from originally?
Bronx, New York City.
Oh, okay. And where do you currently live?
I live in Blackwood, New Jersey.
Oh, okay. Why did I think Pennsylvania?
Right.
That's
I didn't live in, Dave lives in Pennsylvania.
okay. So see, I've got my story already. So let's get into your book, and the title is
Life and Love, The Spirits of Liverpool.
Liverpool. Now, Liverpool was in what state?
Pennsylvania.
Okay, that's where I got the
It was
Pennsylvania.
in Ashley, about 10 miles below Wilkes-Barre.
Okay. And I even used to say Wilkes-Barre, so it's Wilkes-Barre.
People pronounce it different ways. I'm a New Yorker initially.
And you're going to say it different anyway.
Yeah, right. They always ask me to say water.
And car, and
Yeah,
park.
that's another one.
Yeah.
I generally pick up accents depending on where I am. It takes me about a month, and all of a sudden I'm a Southerner, or I'm a Texan, I'm a Californian.
So you're just very diverse. So let's
Yes,
talk
yeah.
about Liverpool was a subsection of Ashley, and
Yes,
then it was demolished in the 70s,
right.
correct?
1950s, actually.
In the 50s.
Late 50s, yep.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
And that was because the mining industry had left that section.
Yes,
Mhm.
Okay. And there was a note I had that it used to be an area for flood victims at first.
That was actually 1972.
Oh, that was after the buildings were gone, then it was made into it. Okay. So you were born of an immigrant family?
I
Oh,
was brought there because my father got drafted into the Navy
okay.
during 1943,
Okay.
and I spent 3 years there. My mother and them finished up. My father only served during the war. Only is fantastic. It's just I can't even think of a word to say for it. But at any rate, I stayed an extra year and went to high school the first year.
Okay. That was your mom and your brother and you.
Yeah, my mom and my brother left after 2 years. I stayed there with my grandmother for an extra year.
Oh, okay. So your family was originally from Poland?
My grandmother and
Really?
grandfather on both sides of the family were from Poland.
Okay.
One was from near Warsaw. They were industrial. My grandmother and grandfather that were in Pennsylvania were originally in the farming area. They were the ones that were controlled by Russia.
Oh, okay. And so there were some things that just really stood out to me that if I can hear sort of bring up some parts that really meant a lot to me in the book, but there was a part where you talked about doctors doing office calls. You want to share any of that experience? I remember that as a kid, but it was at the tail end of when they were doing that.
The doctors themselves in the Ashley area, there were only two doctors. At that time, they had a population because coal mining was still in progress. And the population was somewhere over 10,000 at that time because of the workers that were there and the war that was going on. They needed the coal. So the doctors were all the doctors that I knew at that time just walked around with a little black bag, and in it they had magic potions. If they did, and if you are too sick, they would say you have to go to the hospital. And that was taboo for most of the people there. They never wanted, especially if you were old. And it's still true today. Hospitals do not know how to treat elderly people. They still haven't gotten to the point where they can treat it. I could treat elderly people because I did with my wife for 12 years. But they wound up saying she was going to die in 2 years. I wound up making sure she lived, not only lived, but she wound up going with me. I took her on a train and we went down to Florida and we went to different places. We went to visit her son down there. And she had a fantastic life. There was also magical parts of me going to a person who was not a doctor, but recommended by a woman named Luann, who happened to be married to one of Peggy's sons. She asked me, would I wind up wanting Peggy to undergo this procedure that they go through? She said, sometimes it's used in a veterans hospital. Well, this woman came and she and Luann recited different things. They had a bell. They rang the bell. The woman touched Peggy in different parts and felt her, and as if to be implying a magical touch, as if she was a spirit. It's hard to wind up even describing it. I was looking at both of them, and Luann knew what to say. She had undergone this when she worked in the Veterans Hospital. And about a week later, I noticed an improvement. And then I wound up calling different facilities over, a speech therapist, a person who could wind up doing different things. And these therapists came, they wound up first teaching her how to stand. Initially, it was 15 minutes, which 15 seconds, they'd say, we're going to do it for 30 seconds. It actually extended a minute and a half. And they kept doing this, and the time kept on increasing until Peggy could stand by herself. The speech therapist was another different person entirely. He came in there, he looked at Peggy, and he says, I will get her to wind up speaking. So what did he do? He sang Jingle Bells, Jingle Bells, Jingle. And all of a sudden, Peggy's eyes lit up and she started singing Jingle Bells. This
Oh,
is,
wow.
I mean, this is a person, two doctors wound up saying she wouldn't live for more than 2 years. It was incredible.
So personal care is better than hospital care.
It's if you wind up knowing your patient, and I knew Peggy, I knew what she needed, and I made sure. I had a woman there with her daughter. The daughter was going through nursing school, and the daughter used to be amazed. She used to say, you take out the track? You clean a tray? I says, yeah. What else are you going to do? I says, there's no one else around here to do it. And I put it back in and she breathed. I also wound up playing a trick on her. The first 3 months she was with me in the house, because initially her sons wound up saying, you will not take it to your home. You will wind up putting her in a nursing home. And I screamed at them that Peggy does not want to go into a nursing home. And we got into the nursing home. And fortunately, again, it was Luann. Luann wound up coming up and taking charge of the situation. And the hospital that she was at, the nursing home, they came upstairs and says, "We want to see you downstairs." And they read us a riot act. "You cannot do this in this hospital. You are doing things that we don't do." And with that being said, I says, "I'm taking her out. I'm taking her home." Luann agreed with it. She talked with her husband. Her husband finally got on Luann's side, and that's how she got back home. Otherwise, she would have probably died. I mean, can you imagine a Derek coming into the room and winding up dunking her like a donut in water to bathe her? It's hard to explain how you feel when you see your wife being subjected to that.
Well, you grew up with the whole house call doctors.
Yes, we did
That's
grow up
your
with her.
experience.
Yeah.
And one of
Uh,
the topics that I had next was about the state of hospitals, and you've already covered that because you were talking about that in the other part too, as that hospitals were not a place for the elderly. So
we never got to the doctor in New York City. The doctor in New York City was the same type of doctor that was in Ashley, Pennsylvania. He carried around a little black bag. This is the type of doctors. He was also a doctor that wound up, my mother called him up and said, "I can't make it to your office." And he said, "I'll be there after office hours. I'll be there at 12:30. He came at 12:30. He looked at her and checked her out. "You have appendicitis." He wound up bringing her to his automobile and taking her directly to the hospital.
wow.
This is the type of doctors that you had in those days. They were
Right.
caring people. The doctors today, I wind up looking at them. Some are good doctors, but there's a lot of bad ones.
Hmm. You have a lot of illustrations in the book. And can you talk about those drawings and the pictures that you have?
Yeah, that was I wound up getting I wind up receiving messages. It's hard to wind up saying I wound up someone was telling me, write a book, write a book. You love Liverpool, write a book about Liverpool. And I wound up thinking about it and I said, well, that's good. I could write a book about Liverpool. So I had my daughter who did artwork. I wound up telling her, I need some pictures. And I described the scenes to her that I wanted. And she presented them to me. These are so great. Now I have to write a book because I got all
You have to have a book to go with the pictures.
things tumble on each other. You don't happen to wind up saying, I'm going to write a book, unless you're a writer. But at any rate, it's she drew the pictures up, and the unfortunate part about it is the masters she wound up keeping, and she had them secured, and then she died, and so that ended that. They were in a trunk somewhere. The children didn't know what trunk where it was. There was no ticket for her to wind up getting it back. It was probably sold at auction to someone, and fortunately we had the pictures, copies of the pictures, but
Hmm.
the originals, which she did win somewhere around 5 or 6 first place prizes in Maryland.
So how did you get Dave involved with your book?
Dave got involved in my book. I was having my 70th birthday. He was invited to the party.
90th birthday.
Oh, 90th birthday, yeah. Trying to make myself younger. I'm not that young,
Hey,
honest.
don't we all?
Wishful dreaming. But at any rate, he was there, and I also had Joe there, and I wound up saying that they both seen each other. And I says, welcome to the Millionaires Club, you know? And they wound up knowing each other. They were friends with each other way back when. And they're near the same age bracket. So Joe was extremely happy. Suzanne and Ed, her husband, went up to see them up in Massachusetts, upstate Massachusetts. And my daughter said, Dad, I would never live there. It's lonely. They have a big place, but it's nobody else is around. There's a big lake in back of them.
Yeah,
So,
you gave me the book copy there, right?
yeah.
So
But,
you had some really vivid stories about the ice house. And
oh yeah, the ice house was a very intriguing place. My grandmother used to give me 2 nickels to get ice. Now, whether it was on purpose or not, I never had a discussion about the thing. But as soon as I went to the ice house the first time I went, and you get wheelbarrow, it's a mile and a half to go down to the ice house.
oh, wow.
And you wind up talking to the guy, and he says, what do you want? I says, I want a big piece of broken ice for a nickel. He says, you got to be kidding. I says, no, you got plenty of broken ice in there. I says, give me 2 pieces. So they eventually did. He got to know me, and he wound up giving me the nickel. And the other part of the story is I nearly got hit by a truck, and that one wound up, he accidentally, because of the way he swerved and went partially off the road and then back on the road, a carton of cigarettes dropped off. I wound up saying, oh, I'll give my mother a pack, and then I have 9 packs to go. And by the time I started going up the hill with the ice and the cigarettes, I started thinking to myself, what if? And the what if wound up being a guilt complex coming out. Why would I want to lie to my mother, who I love so much? And then I said, okay, I'll take the pack and give her the 9 packs. So I did do that, and I hid the one thing with the chickens under where they lay the eggs in the chicken coop. And
Oh,
I
and then
really,
didn't you keep the other nickel too?
I kept the other nickel. And that Donald, that's David's father, and I used to wind up once every month going down into Wilkes-Barre. We walked the 3 or 4 miles into town, and there used to be a pinball shop there. They had like 20 machines, and we used a nickel there. Donald would always win. And if he wound up hitting a score, the owner would give him money. I never got a cent. And
That was your brother, right?
I had
Your
my
brother?
things sitting on my sneakers to level the playing field, and I still lost.
Donald, my dad was George's cousin. They were first cousins.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yep. My dad still has pinball machines stored away.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
what a great
Nice.
story, because he was good at it.
Yes, he was.
He was good at everything except playing for matchsticks. I used to beat him occasionally there, but that's the only time I won. I've had a lot of people in my life that have played with in sort of semi-gambling arenas. I'm not a big gambler. I never was, and I never will be, because it's a waste of money to gamble unless you're the house. But I'd wind up playing games, and inevitably I'd always lose. But I didn't really care. It was just the enjoyment of playing with a group of people that you loved.
Mm. So you had a lot of cliches. I love cliches. And here's what I think about this generation and on is they're going to lose some of those, because we don't even know how, I know I say ones and I don't know where it came from other than I heard it growing up. But I love those, the use of, you would use different cliches and all of it, peppered throughout all of your words of wisdom. And One of them was, which I never heard before, the flip side of the pancake.
The what?
Flip side of the pancake.
Flip side of the pancake. I'm trying to think of that one.
I think that's, the other side of the story, or on the other hand, and that sort of thing. But you said it a couple of times, and I thought, I like
Well, that's because there's two sides to every story. And that's the analogy I used to wind up describing the flip of a pancake, one side and the other side.
Yeah, two sides to every story. Absolutely. So, the ticket experience.
That was a story where I learned my grandmother was truly a psychic. She wound up telling me to go on a trip. Now, I don't know if I really did or not, but I did go to the bus stop. I can wind up visualizing me waiting for the bus and wondering why the bus isn't coming. The bus comes and I'm on a bus and no one speaks. It's silent in a bus. And then the bus driver speeds away and we're going fast and no one is saying anything. And the bus driver isn't talking. I'm listening and waiting for someone or hear mumbling or something. Nothing. And then the bus driver winds up saying everybody's off. And then this guy in a weird costume comes through. I mean, he has a funny hat. He has the jacket on. He looks like a character from a movie that you would wind up expecting. And he winds up, he doesn't say a word. He just winds up waving his hand and everybody starts following him. We follow him and he gets into his big gate and he winds up, and the fence is about 12 feet high. It's really high, and I look at it and I can't believe what's going on. And then he opens up the fence, the doors, and they swing open, and he tells the people to come in. The people come in. He closes the gate. He doesn't lock it. He just closes it, and he starts walking. And we walk and walk and walk, and we're going up this hill, and we finally, I don't know how long it was, an hour, a half hour, but I mean, I was really beat. And we get up to the top, and all of a sudden, this area with all these things sticking out, monuments, castles, different things. And it's hard to wind up describing what you see. And the people are walking all around there and moving around. And I look at them and they're not saying anything. I can't say anything. There's no one to talk to. And I just start admiring the workmanship that was done on these sites. And I assume that they were grave sites because what else could be up on top of the hill? But there were thousands of them. You could look for miles and miles and wind up seeing nothing but these here monuments up on top of the hill all over. And again, you wind up looking at it, and I started examining them closer. I got closer to them, and I just wound up saying, I'm tired. You had a long day. Take a nap. And I wind up taking a nap, and all of a sudden, nothing. I said, so where did the people go? I wasn't sleeping that long. And I look, and about a mile or 2 miles away, they're leaving. And I said, what am I going to do now? How do I get myself down in there? And all of a sudden, I said, I got to sleep. When I wake up, I'm in my grandmother's house. Now, this isn't the first time this happened. I had another incident where I wound up playing Ring Alevio with the kids. And I was up on top of the coal bank. And I flew down, hit my head on the post. And they said I was out for about 3 or 4 minutes. They asked me if I was okay when I woke up. I said, okay, I'm going home. and I'd start walking home, and that's the last thing I remember. The next thing you know, the next day, I'm in bed. What happened in that period of time? I have no idea.
Mm.
Things like that happen to me, and I keep on saying, where did the time go? What did I do? How come my grandmother or my aunts or my mother wind up saying, hey, what are you doing? Why are you looking the way you do? I mean, I can't sneak in a house. It has three other people in it, and there's no way for me to sneak in a house without someone acknowledging it, and no one said anything. And I wound up telling my grandmother the next day, I says, I went on this bus ride, just like you said, and they didn't take the ticket. And she looks at me, points the finger. They will come back for the ticket. They will come back.
Mm. She gave you an experience, it sounds like, of the possibilities that could
Right. Like I said, I can't wind up watching what happened in that time because maybe I had a concussion and I don't remember anything, but no one said anything to me. When I woke up in the next morning, it was like I was never gone.
Mm. Um, it sounds like you've had, you had an aunt in the house. There were several others. So your mom, your grandmother, how many was in the family in that house in Liverpool? You
It
had
was
such an
like,
extended
yeah,
family.
that's another story that winds up and wasn't mentioned in the book. When my mother was born, because I talked to her and tried to find out what her earlier life was like. And she said it was the most wonderful life a little girl could ever have. She was the first one in the family to get a bear. She was the first one to get a fur coat. And I wound up thinking, why is she favored like that? Then I started checking. And what happens out in the Ashley area, Wilkes-Barre area, is the youngest one is always appointed as the caretaker of the parents.
Oh,
And my mother wound up meeting my father at 16, getting pregnant, and then going to New York City and getting married a month before I was born. So I was an immaculate child. I started off as an immaculate child, They could have wound up doing different things, but I lived.
um, so when you lived in Liverpool, your dad was in the military, your mom was there, and it just sounded like you had a good extended family in that area.
And I wound up being loved by women all the time. My aunts, everybody, because all the men were gone to war.
Mm.
And so there was always females around. And they wound up really making the load for the child much easier. They wound up showing what they could do. In the meantime, we were learning how to do different things, which we couldn't do in a city. We had more room to roam around. We had places to go to in the mountains and pick blueberries. There was big acres of areas in the mountains outside of Ashley where you could go and pick buckets full of berries. And my grandmother was a great cook. I mean, a great pastry maker, a great pie maker, bread maker, anything you want. My grandmother did, and she taught her children how to do the same thing.
Um, that's one of the things that I don't want to, I'm realizing I might give away parts of the story, but they're parts that people need to read. That's why I'm only touching on them. But
Sure.
this connection with people, and how they, were shaping you into the person that you were. And uh, one of the quotes you had that it stood out was, all of us must take the chance to prove who we are. And I honestly can't remember in regards to what that was, but you had some guidance in the book, and that is a big part of the book in the beginning and then sort of sporadically throughout. Do you want
Well,
to
in the
share any?
beginning of your book, before I got to what the Liverpool section, I was learning how to write. And so
Mhm.
all I could think of is you have to write something that happened to you or you think happened to you. And that's how all these things. The bullying was a part of my life that I hated from the beginning. I hated people who were bullies. I
Mm.
thought they were something else. And I really came out of the woods on the first time I wound up seeing a bully in action. And I won the battle. Maybe people would consider it unfair, but they have to look back at the story and they wind up seeing that, hey, when he tried to box in the PAL, he got knocked out with one shot. And I recognize this fact. So everything was precarious as far as winding up fighting or anything. And I did it anyway,
And the
and
PAL was the,
Police Athletic League.
oh, okay, it was a sort of a youth group.
Right. It's
Oh, it's
like the CYO, the Catholic Youth Organization. The PAL winds up being another one.
okay.
It's the life at that time, and people wind up saying, well, the kids are different today. And they are, because, in my opinion, what's happening as the Earth moves away from the main constellation because of the Big Bang, they have to become smarter. They have to wind up learning how to do the things that they're doing, rockets and Mars. Mars to me, like, is why Mars, But the younger generation has to wind up doing the things that they do best. And the things that I wind up hoping that they do is something to bring the people of the earth all together as
Mm.
one.
That was real evident. You talked a lot about racial equality, women's equality, and those were very passionately written throughout your book. And then you talked so much about family and family time and uh,
Family, that's the most important thing in life, is your family. I lived to wind up making sure my father and mother were people who wound up being happy because they had me as their son.
mm,
Really was my number one thing. And then when I went into the service, I wanted to make sure that our country was as safe as it could be with me in a position to help. And I'm a sort of like a crybaby too. I seen E.T., I cried, and
oh, I'm with you
even
there. So I,
Me
I've
too.
never left the Bambi, crying at Bambi all my.
the mountain lion and uh,
um I loved your cookout story when you talked about you guys snuck off and you sort of gathered some food from fields and you made a fire
oh
and
yeah, yeah. The kids in the neighborhood once a year wound up doing that. They had to gather the wood. They went in and took remnants from the farm. There was potatoes there and corn still there and onions, and we threw them all in the fire, and then would wind up getting a stick and pulling them out, and you wind up everybody would have a black mouth from the charcoal of the potato. To crunch it open like this and eat the potato, and it was we sang songs, but singing was a normal thing. Even when I was in the Bronx, when I got back from Ashley, I joined a group called the Flashers, and we wound up every Friday night going on a church of this, going on a stoop of this deserted check, church, and the guy who was in charge of us, he'd wind up buying a case of beer, and we'd all have one beer, and we'd be singing all kinds of songs. And I just loved that. I loved singing and things like that. I loved acting. When I was first came back from Ashley, St. Peter's and Paul's had an audition to wind up having people. They were going to have a Broadway director come down and run a show. And I fortunately wound up getting a piece of the show by being the stooge who winds up coming out in the middle of the stage when they're doing changes in scenery and stuff like that. And I came out one scene. He says, and now introducing Frank Sinatra. And I'd come out there, I had the big bow tie and everything, and I'd sing Racing with the Moon. And the people would go, huh? Frank Sinatra? You got to be kidding. But I've had so many exciting parts of my life. It sort of gives me chills at times thinking about it. And as far as the guidance goes, I don't know who is guiding me. Is there some particle in the brain that winds up enabling you to wind up respecting the people many years ago that wound up being alive and working hard so that you could be born 100, 200 years later? I don't know. There's a lot that I don't know, and I try to avoid thinking about it because I just want to wind up enjoying life.
Mm. The main theme was, you talked about the good old days, and that was so refreshing. And I want to bring up a quote you have on page 127. Of course, that's Kindle. I don't know what it would be in a written page, but it's never too late to learn to love each other. And I love that quote.
I always believe that. You're my first wife, I wound up she wound up doing things that she shouldn't have done. And then she wanted a divorce, and I wound up agreeing. I picked up her debt. It was close to $30,000. I wound up paying for her to go to school because she hadn't gone to school in 25 years. And I also paid her alimony. So I still loved her to a certain degree. I didn't like what she did, but as a human being, I still loved her.
Mm.
Um,
So
me.
this podcast is called Bloom Where You're Planted. So what does that quote mean to you?
You have to wind up being part of the earth. And we all bloom in different ways. We wind up coming up and thinking that we're different. None of us are different. I wind up sometimes looking at myself as on a stage. The earth is a big stage, and someone's looking down at us, and we're making do with our work, with our play, with our enjoyment. And we try to bloom like flowers that grow around us. We try to bloom like animals who wind up trying to protect themselves. It's uh, it's one that it's hard to wind up explaining, except for the fact that you wind up knowing that a person who winds up blooming is a person that will help this earth grow better.
I like that. So what words of wisdom would you have for someone that wants to do what you've done?
My word of advice to them is to wind up doing it, because like when I first started, I thought it was a joke. My mind saying, "Hey, you should write a book," And I'm looking at him saying, "Raj, look, how can you write a book?" And once I had gotten my daughter involved in a thing, then I said, "Now I have to write a book. And I said, well, I don't know how to write. And what you have to do is write. People don't realize, in 20 years, I probably had either computer errors. My daughter says, Dad, computers don't wind up stealing things. And I wind up thinking that someone, and whether I did it on purpose or not knowingly, eliminated like maybe 30, 40 pages of what I'd done. And I try to remember what I was thinking of and what I was doing. And sometimes it became a repetitious incident. And I wound up looking at it and I said, I can't do this, and I just kept on doing it. And then when Peggy got the problem, when she wound up going into the coma, and I started being a little more. And then when she died, I sort of made it an agreement with myself. Somehow I'll finish this book. And I just kept on going. And I put my heart into it because that's the way people should do things. They should always put their heart into the things. And if you don't like it, then do something else. Like right now, I'm working on lyrics for a song. I have about 25 pages of the start of the song. And I realized it's a lot more difficult than you think. Even writing a book has to be easier than writing lyrics for a particular song that you were given a title to. And it's interesting because I'm thinking of the choral groups, the groups, rap, this, that, and it's very interesting. I wound up having one of my caretakers take a look at it, and she's went through about 10 pages of it within 15, 20 minutes. And she looked at me and says, George, you're very romantic.
Well,
You know,
I was going to ask, the next question was what's next for you, but it sounds like it's the song or
yeah.
songs. You might have multiple songs there if you've got 20 some pages.
No, I have another one. After the song gets through, I want to win the lottery.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I have things planned for me. I don't have any date when I'm going to die. So I just wind up living like next year I'll have this done. And 2 years from now I'll have this done. I still feel fairly healthy. I have a couple of therapists coming in now because arthritis is starting to kick in. And they're showing me how I should walk better and shrug my shoulders better and different things. And it's hard work, but it's paying off. I mean, I could feel myself getting stronger.
That's awesome. And well, I look forward to hearing more of your progress and things. And I'm sure that Dave will keep me informed because he's been a real advocate of you. And I'm so glad that he connected us together.
Right.
And he's been a big help to you to get your book out. And again, the book is Life and Love.
Right.
The Spirits of Liverpool. Where are we? Yeah.
Maybe.
Life and Love, The Spirits of Liverpool.
Yes. And where can we find your book? Will it be on Amazon or
Amazon.
Amazon. Print and Kindle versions.
Okay, awesome. So Dave got his printed version, and that's cool. To hold a book must be a real thrill.
It was definitely a thrill and brought tears into my eyes. And I told David that when he says, you're being published on your 92nd birthday. And tears ran into my eyes. And it was like a dream that I said had to happen while I was still living, and
Well, when was your 92nd birthday?
92nd birthday. That was February 22nd.
Oh, well, happy late birthday.
Okay.
Hold that up now that we've got the clear image too.
Yes. Life and Love, The Spirits of Liverpool, and it's on Amazon. So I want to thank both of you for coming on and sharing your story. And it's been real exciting to have someone publish their first book at 92.
It's a miracle.
Congratulations. And I hope I've done well as your grandson.
Right.
So again, so thank you guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I loved the way you wound up going through the book.
I loved it. All right. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So as our time comes to a close, remember to keep creating, keep sharing, and keep supporting each other. And remember to bloom where you're planted. Bye for now.